we are here in real life. And this is one of my few podcast in-person recordings that I've done. So thank you for dealing with my awkward self. Victoria Hutchins, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It didn't feel awkward to me. It felt good. I'm so happy you're here. This is so fun already. Cheers.
Welcome to Mary's Cup of Tea.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to tell everybody that from the moment that we connected in the Instagram DMs to the moment that I booked my flight was exactly 7.5 hours.
We moved fast.
We moved really fast. And then I came to Houston, picked you up, went on a date, which thank you so much for lunch.
Of course. It was lovely. We sat in the sun. It's been such a nice day. I'm so happy you're here. This doesn't feel, it feels like a play date, not a podcast.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for this work that we get to do, but I know it's layered and I'm equal parts fascinated by what you talk about and also how you talk about it and the creative process like underneath it all. So I'm going to ask a mix of selfish questions and also hopefully people will walk away feeling hopeful, soulful, joyful because you embody all of that so beautifully.
I think the same about you. So I appreciate that. That's sweet to hear from you because you're just a force of love and hope.
Something new that I'm doing on the podcast is asking people, what's your proverbial cup of tea? And I usually ask it without prep because I just want something like you're enjoying lately. It could be small, it could be big.
I just started reading, and this is going to be a dark cup of tea. I just started reading A Little Life, which if you know, it's tragic, but I haven't gotten to the tragic part yet. So my experience with it so far has been just like stunningly beautiful writing that names feelings that, feel like they come out of your heart. I love books where I think the best books, my favorite books or poems make me feel like, oh, that's a feeling I already had. I just didn't know how to name. And there's been so much of that in A Little Life. I know it's going to get devastating, but I'm really enjoying it so far. So that's my proverbial cup of tea.
Did you see my notes?
Yeah, I did see.
Okay, so you knew I was going to bring it up?
Well, I saw your notes. And so I think that's why it came to my mind first.
Okay, because you mentioned it in a podcast episode from a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
And I literally, this is what I didn't tell you over lunch. I have a lot of like weird connections with you just in terms of like things we have in common that I'm like, oh my God, this is like so niche and like so specifically divine timing wise. So when you had mentioned that on your podcast, I was also just started getting into it. And a lot of, people want to know what I think of it so far because a lot of people think that it's a little too traumatic and, triggering. But I couldn't agree more with you that it's a book that there's like a before I read A Little Life. By the way, it's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Yeah, there's like a before I read that book and I'm still mid-book, but I feel like it's just altered my cellular composition.
Yes. And I feel like for me, what I've noticed most so far, and I think maybe this is just my vantage point and being obsessed with writing right now, but just the ability to kind of paint a picture so vividly with words and unusual words to describe things that also like fit so well, but it's how did you think of describing this that way? She's a beautiful writer.
Yeah.
And I can tell the tragic turns. Like, I don't know exactly what is going to happen, but I am at the part where it's very clear, like with Jude's character, that it's going to get really sad. And so I'm interested to see what that will be like. And I actually don't know much feedback about the book. Like, I have heard it's extremely sad. That's really all I've heard. So
yeah. The one time I posted about it, I got 500 responses. And I've never had that kind of like, response to my story besides like maybe getting married.
Yes. It's one of those, if it's even like in the background, it's a talking point right now. That's so funny that you were starting to read it at the same time.
I'm so consumed by it. It's one of those, like, it's all I can think about. It's all I can talk about to my husband. So he thought it was like an innocent novel and he downloaded the audiobook. He's like, I want to share this experience with you. But he doesn't do well with bad things. It just makes him really angry. And then he gets angry. But we had an in and out date last Friday. And for 2.5 hours, I just basically retold him the book.
We'll have to have a long conversation about it. How many pages in are you?
I'm probably just over halfway.
Oh, okay. So you're much farther than I am. I'm like 100, probably 40 pages in or something.
It's so perfect. I'm sorry. I just need to land here for one more second. But it's so perfect because it's 4 male friends, right? There's different races. They're different sexualities, but it's also not about race or sexuality at all. It's equal parts male friendships, but again, not in like this book is about male friendships because healthy masculinity or whatever. It's like, this is life. And what I was telling my husband is that when you get to some of those more difficult themes, especially the ones related to mental health, the way that it's written, even if there's like drug abuse or whatever, you put yourself so deeply in that situation that you're like, oh yeah, well that totally makes sense. Do you know? Or like I would also do drugs in that situation. I would also, I don't want to give away the book, but I would also, I don't know.
Right. So and like that's a big point of art, right? Is to be able to like really understand the vantage points that maybe you haven't experienced. And I do really believe like this is a very philosophical and heady response to that. But I think that most of us would do most of the things we say we would never do if in the right
100%.
If our experiences led us there. That's a good thing for a book to remind you. Like we think we are so maybe like better is not the word, but just more evolved than certain things. And it's so much of it is our circumstances.
Oh, for sure. I guess like that's like kind of what we learned so much in Unpacking Privilege. But with that, and it's not heady at all. I actually have like a bitchy hot take. I think that not reading fiction keeps our brains underdeveloped. And that's like a hot take I've been telling people that some people don't like because we're so deep in self-help. You and I are both like nonfiction kind of self-helpy-ish authors too.
I hate that about myself because I'm also I'm a mostly nonfiction reader.
Same,
and I feel like that must be some internalized misogyny or something because like, why am I a little Chad that only wants to read
Atomic Habits?
Literally Atomic Habits by James Clear on repeat. Like what's going, like how do I address that in therapy? Because you're so right. Fiction, we learn so much from fiction. It turns on different parts of our brain. It's every bit as educational as nonfiction, but in different ways. But I think like, it's kind of the like growth mindset programming, if you feel like you're not like actively teaching yourself something, you're not learning. And that's so counterintuitive to actual learning. Like so much learning happens through imagination. And
Yeah, the level of empathy reading about somebody who you cannot relate to at all, like in the case of Jude, what I love is that he's not only racially ambiguous, sexually ambiguous, like background is ambiguous, everything, right? And yet still you have this so much like deep compassion and it's just the depth of the emotions that you can access in fiction is not available to you in Atomic Habits.
You're so right. And I needed to hear that. That was like in a good way.
You're reading it.
No, I am reading it. I'm working on that. I feel like I talk about this a lot, but I just feel like there's 2 little people that live in my brain. And one is like a Chad that like eats eggs and like is into lifting. I don't lift, but you know what I mean?
A man in
like
finance.
Yeah, a man in finance. Exactly. There's a man in finance that lives in my brain. And then there's like an artist, creative, and I'm always trying to reach her, but like Chad is so much louder. You know what I mean?
How did that start? Like, were you always into the...
I think it's just being like, I think many of us probably deal with what I'm talking about. I think it's just like hustle culture, like internalized hustle culture. And there's on one hand, internalizing kind of societal messages about productivity. On the other hand, I do think I am a person who intrinsically feels my best when I'm in like goal-oriented mindsets. For a long time, I fought myself on that. Like when I left, I was an attorney before I was a content creator, as you know. And when I left my job, I think I went through this burnout phase of kind of like anti-productivity. And I thought that would feel good for me and that would feel like self-care. And That was me taking care of myself. And I realized that felt like shit. It doesn't feel good for me to just like fly by the seat of my impulses. So I do have to keep some element of being like goal oriented. And I do think that's good for me mentally. But it's like I always struggle with finding the balance between like being goal oriented, being learning oriented, and enjoying my life and letting myself learn things through kind of more natural, intuitive processes. So much of like the way we think about learning and education is so like coded for just kind of not to be like political, but like the patriarchy. It's just like we've turned learning into this very like crystallized thing that often it isn't. It's a much more fluid thing. And I'm trying to like tap into that more. You know what I mean? The learning that happens in the physical body and the learning that happens by letting your mind wander.
Yeah.
But
getting bored.
Yes, getting bored, not Googling every question you have. Like I'm so quick to run to Miss Chat GPT, if I'm so honest, with every little question that runs through my head. And like, Victoria, you need to wonder sometimes. Like that's how you really learn things. You don't need to be asking her. And it's bad for the environment. I know that.
Wait, Chat GPT is bad for the environment?
I've learned that recently. It's very bad for the environment. It uses a lot of water. So does streaming. So does everything. We live in a society. But yeah, I'm just learning that learning doesn't always, it's okay and good for me to be learning focused, development focused, but that doesn't need to look rigid, if that makes sense.
Totally. I think so much of just life. I hate whenever I'm on my podcast, I'm like, and that's life, and so much of life, and in life, I'm like,
now that we've solved the world's problems.
Life, yeah. No, but even like in recovery and healing, there is a moment, and we talked about this like socioculturally, like we'll get there, but in the mental health space, for example, there's a moment of overcorrection. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, fuck, we lost some of those elements that actually we rejected, and we needed to reject them blatantly at that point in time. But then we slowly come back to them. Like suddenly after recovery, ordering a salad is not as triggering as it might have been back then, right? Or reading self-help because you have other tools at your disposal. You have a repertoire and you choose freely from that repertoire rather than feeling like you're forced into it.
Yes. And I think societally, we needed to have like a huge pushback on kind of things like diet culture. Not that we've solved them by any means, but like there's so much conversation and it needed to be that way. And individually, I think when you are in recovery or healing disordered eating or healing your relationship with food, often you need to land at a point of kind of like, I'm giving myself unmitigated permission to just be. I'm not holding myself accountable. I'm not pushing myself because I weaponized pushing myself against myself.
Yeah.
So you need to learn how to like be able to exist without doing that. But then I think for me at least, that was a stepping stone. I needed that. And it's the same when you quit a job, you're burnout, you need unmitigated rest. But then at some point, you need to get up. You know what I mean? You need to, and some part of you wants to. And I think like something that I see going on culturally right now is like at least I've experienced myself making an identity out of something that was just meant to be somewhere I went. You know what I mean? A place I needed to be for a moment. Like anti-productivity, for example. That made sense after being an attorney who did nothing but work for years on it. That makes sense that I needed to rest at that place. But that's not where I needed to stay, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in kind of like defending the ethics of a place where we need to rest for a while that we start to identify with it and it feels uncomfortable when you're ready to move on.
Someone told me like if you identify as anti something, you're almost still contributing to that something.
Totally.
Because where attention goes, energy flows. I don't know if I fully believe that in all circumstances, but I do think language is so powerful. So instead of saying like I'm anti-diet, simple shift, I'm an intuitive eater. I'm anti, I don't know, hustle culture. Maybe I like intentional work productivity or
Right.
whatever.
And it comes down to your intentions, right? Because if you're living your life in reaction to something, regardless of whether it's like you're living your life to conform with it or you're living your life in rebellion against it, then all your energy is going to that, just like you said. All your focus is on that thing. It's like when you are a teenager and you make your whole identity about like rebelling against whatever your parents' ideology is. Like you're still, you know what I mean? It's not really, you think that's being yourself, but really it's a reaction.
Right.
And then
yeah.
at some point you land
Yeah.
somewhere that's more authentic to you.
Yeah, totally. Wait, were you a rebellious teen?
No, I wish I had rebelled more. Honestly, I was.
You know when you're a rebellious teen? No,
No,
not me.
I was
Though. Not me.
No, honestly, I had like my rebellion moments in my 20s.
Yeah.
I was such a little like, I was a nerd in high school. Like, not, I say that in a non-derogatory way, and I stand by being like an academic girl. But I do wish I had rebelled a little more. Like, I wish I had. I don't know. I'm glad I was safe, and I had my certain things. Like I had a few. I dabbled, whatever. But like, no, I would not say I was rebellious. What about you? What were you like?
Yes and no. I kind of developed early in a lot of ways, meaning not just like my boobs grew, my period started, but I also smoked a ton of weed when I was 12. If you're my little sister and you're listening to this, no, you're not. And then I got caught when I was 13. So that time of my life was like so short-lived. And I somehow got it together because I just hated the trust that I broke with my mom through all that. Same thing with sex. Like I kind of started earlier than I wanted to, but I guess I did kind of get it out of my system. The way that I rebelled was more like spiritually, emotionally against religion, specifically when I would go and visit my dad. And the way that looked like for me was not much else besides like really dark black eyeliner because he hated it and thought it was devilish. So in that way, I guess I wasn't like as rebellious as I
devil
thought.
worshiper with your black eyeliner.
Satan.
Okay.
Yeah. I just have such a complicated relationship with my adolescence. We talk so much about inner child healing. I love the people who are now starting to talk about like inner teens.
Yes.
Right?
The inner teen needs so much more attention than we give her or them. Yeah.
Well, tell me if you're comfortable, of course. I feel like in reading your poetry book, Make Believe, which I'm so excited to share with everybody, but I was kind of, and I've followed you for a really long time. Nevertheless, when I read some of those poems, I was like, oh, wait, this is like eating disorder recovery coded. Is that something that you went through or any other? I mean, there's like a lot of mental health themes in the book too.
Yeah, definitely. So I did struggle with disordered eating. I think one reason I don't talk about it more on the internet is like I never received any diagnoses. Like I didn't ever do treatment, anything like that. And so I feel like one reason I don't talk about it a ton, even though I write about it a lot, is because I don't still feel like I have like the exact verbiage, you know? However, I would say like without like, I never received diagnoses for these things and I'm not a doctor, but like I severely restricted my calories. I made myself throw up for years, you know, on and off like high school through law school. Things with eating issues reached a head when I was in law school. That was definitely the most severe time. But like I have experienced disordered eating kind of in phases throughout my life. And I would say now, like I'm not in a perfect place with food. Like I feel really lucky I haven't done, you know, like making myself throw up, for example. That's like, I have not done that in years and years since law school. However, like I do think like one of the worst things about disordered eating is like once you've experienced it, that little worm like lives in your brain forever. And it's very interesting to be someone who writes so much about like body neutrality when often I struggle with living body neutrality, you know? And so that's something that like I feel really, I guess, hesitant thinking about the way I share online. Like I wish I could put a big disclaimer on everything I ever share about like food and body. Like this is coming from someone who's kind of in the struggle with you, not someone who has it figured out. Like I've come a very long way. And I think maybe I don't give myself credit or quite like remember how things were. Like it was serious at its worst times. And now like, I mean, I'm physically healthy, which is great. And my mind is a lot more free. But I think like I feel so angry towards kind of the ways diet culture is used to sell us things as women and people in general, not just women, it's everybody, but like it's planting a seed that will live in your brain forever, even after recovery. And that's like a really hard thing to watch continue to happen. And it's still alive and well. Like there's a poem in Make Believe called How to Become Unrecognizable by Summer that I've shared online. And it's a poem where it sounds like it's like giving diet advice. And then by the end, you can tell it's like a warning against, what happens when disordered eating takes over your brain. And a couple weeks ago, I had a diet company took that video and like posted it and had like an automated DM thing where every person who commented, it directed to like sell them diet products. And it got a ton of views. And so like, I know that like so many people received DMs about diet products as a result of that. And that sort of like,
did they just clip the first part?
No, which exactly like.
Yeah, that used to happen to me a lot in my early days because I used to post like reverse transformation photos where I gained weight. And then, these companies would still use it and it would still sell.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't even bother to switch it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, or I don't understand how that's even working for you. It goes against what you're trying to do. But I guess they're just counting on people either like having too short of attention spans to like digest the content for what it is, or they just are trying to get eyes. And I think sadly, like, whether it's content that's clearly like for kind of recovery communities or it's content that's for people who are interested in dieting, all those people are vulnerable to like purchasing and engaging with diet products. You know what I mean? And so I guess from those companies' vantage point, it doesn't really matter, because they don't care if people who have eating disorders are very likely to purchase diet products. We're extremely vulnerable to that. So, but that sort of thing is just infuriating to me. And like, we just live in such an interesting, on the one hand, like you should have the right to do whatever you want to do with your body. I wouldn't even say I'm like anti-diet, and I've never been in a larger body. So like I can't speak to the experience of like someone who is bigger and like wants to lose weight and tell them that they shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like that's just not my place, and I've never experienced that. And I think it's really interesting the way that like kind of recovery communities intersect with like the communities of people in bigger bodies, because it's like there's crossover, but we also have really different experiences. And like there's so much complexity there. I feel like I talked for 40 years. But to answer your question, yes, I've struggled with disordered eating. Yes, I have.
Let's grow old and talk for 40 years.
Let's do it.
No, there's so much there. I don't want anybody to misconstrue this, but this is something that I've changed my mind about as of late. And it's inspired by a lot of retreat attendees that would come. And I've actually had more than 2 or 3 people, I want to say like a handful of people that have come on my retreats who have gone through bariatric surgery. And who am I to say that's self-love or not, or that's recovery or not, or whatever? Like, who the fuck am I?
Yeah.
And it goes back to like how we started with in the novel with a lot of these like mental health themes and everything. Like, who am I to say I wouldn't if I was in that situation? Do you know what I mean?
Totally. I totally know what you mean. And I think it also just comes down to we're very obsessed with like identity and buckets and kind of like moral categories.
Moral righteousness.
You know what I mean? Right now, like we love to, there's so much talk online right now about like the erasure of nuance and how like just nuance is disappearing from culture. And I do really believe that. And I think with something like weight loss, it's so nuanced and it's so individual. And whether it's, the place it's coming from and like that individual's experience with it, all of that is super relevant. And like no one can tell you but you.
Yeah.
Whether it's a good or a bad thing, or whether it's coming from a place of self-love or a place of like hate. And I do really believe that with any type of self-development journey, if you use self-hate as like the fuel to get where you're going, you're still going to hate yourself when you get there, whether it's weight loss, whether it's striving for a career change, whatever. Like, I don't think that self-hate is a good fuel for change. And so, at least for me personally, and I think for most people, that's not going to feel good. But we never know what's motivating someone else's journey.
Yeah. And that's like part of the journey. I have friends right now who are on ozempic, and I wholeheartedly support them. Do I have complicated feelings about it? Yeah. Do I think it's the best idea? I don't know. Probably closer leaning toward no. Would I do differently in that situation? I don't know. But it's also it's the journey. It's their journey, not mine. And so I try to critique the grander cultural backslide that Ozempic is probably bringing up in terms of body image, because it felt like we went body positivity and now we always seesaw or oscillate. But at the same time, like, I have dear friends, like close friends, people that are very close to me, and I would never judge them for that, or I would never tell them not to, because it's not my place.
Definitely. I feel so much vitriol towards companies that teach us to hate ourselves to sell us things. However, and Ozempic and all of the companies that are offering Ozempic-like products, I can't remember what the actual chemical is called, but like, they're doing that for sure. However, if you're able to take these things that are sold to you in an effort, using self-hate marketing and have a positive journey with it, more power to you. You know what I mean? Like, I think, I don't know. And again, like, I'm, as someone who's never been in a bigger body, like, I just feel like it's one of those things where it's not my place to like say, but also I feel like we have to hold kind of the systems accountable, and not like the ways individuals like respond to like this just broken system that we're living in. You know what I mean?
Like, we need to talk about the hims and hers ad,
Exactly.
not who's buying it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, although, this is where it's just like also convoluted. Although, do we kind of like vote with our dollars in that regard? Like, should we still be using plastic straws, even though we know that one individual using plastic straws isn't going to do as much as like corporations taking accountability, but still there's like a value piece there.
100%. And it's like, can we individually try to make the best choices we can, but then also not focus our energy when it comes to holding things accountable, focus our energy on like systems and not people. But then, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's like trying to get it right individually, but then not judging. I don't know. It's just so extremely complicated.
It is extremely complicated. But I appreciate that you don't shy away from it, especially I think on your podcast. And you have such a beautiful, eloquent way with words. And I know you're natural, but it also must not come by accident in your content. Like, clearly a lot of thought goes into that. But in your podcast specifically, there's like a bit more like chutzpah, I would say, in there. And
what does chutzpah mean?
Chutzpah is the Yiddish word for like, not balls, but ovaries, like,
got it.
A little bit of gur.
I like that.
Yeah. And I've really, really enjoyed Soul Gum, your podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I think that so many of us do feel like we have to have everything figured out to have value to share. And I learn the most from people who are like in the struggles with me, and I'm trying to get more comfortable with presenting myself that way, because it's a disservice to myself and my integrity, and also to others when I try to present myself as someone who hasn't figured it out, because I don't. I write because I struggle.
No, it is so liberating to say like, I'm fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fucked up about this. What about you?
Totally.
That's how I like to create also. It's just so we don't leave people hanging. Would you feel comfortable reading that poem of how to become unrecognizable by summer?
Of course. I'd love to.
Because we're talking here in March and summer is like right around the corner.
Yeah, it's peak season for summer is 90 days away.
I know.
How to become unrecognizable by summer. Water with lemon, hot. No gluten, no GMOs, no processed foods, no added sugar, no eating until noon. 10% incline, 45 minutes, no days off. Remember that fruit carbs are still carbs. Let some time pass. You used to write poetry before bed, but lately you can't hold your eyes open. You used to love to bake, but now it's too tempting. You used to love stopping for a donut on the way home from the dog park, carefully picking out a Boston cream in a maple bar. But now when your boyfriend asks, you say, "No, I'm trying to be good." You used to listen when your friends talked, but tonight you can't stop looking at the bread on the table. You add up what you've eaten today, say to yourself, "Okay, one piece, no butter, and I'll go for a run after this." First thing in the morning, you used to pray. Now you go straight to the bathroom mirror, pull up your shirt, and look at your stomach. Congratulations. You don't recognize yourself.
How do you feel when you reread your work?
It depends on the poem. I like this one. I think it's very honest. It's very honest to the experience of how eating disorders consume your brain.
Yeah.
Because often poems like this that are sad are some of the ones that are like people widely relate to them, and that makes me sad.
I think not only is it healing, but reading that for me was liberating because it highlighted how much I've censored myself over the years. Because like you said, it is so honest. And I think in a sea of trigger warnings and what you talked about, like lacking nuance and just like tiptoeing around subjects to talk about them in a perfectly politically correct way has exhausted me quite a bit. And just reading that and being like, wow, that's like verbatim, word for word, action by action, exactly what I used to do. And I don't know, being reminded of that also highlighted how far I've come. And it just, yeah, it was all the things. But only because it was real. It couldn't be all the things if it wasn't real.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. I feel like it's hard to admit as creators that we kind of struggle with like candy coating our lives. I definitely struggle with it to a big degree. And we all want to be really real, but it's hard. One of my favorite poets, Joy Sullivan.
Oh my gosh, I love Joy Sullivan.
I'm obsessed with Joy Sullivan, like to a weird degree. I feel like I talk about her every time I talk. It's embarrassing.
I just got her book.
Yeah, Instructions for Traveling West. It's dynamite. She has this like poetry masterclass that I just took, and one of the big like sections of it was on vulnerability, and it was like, just talking about how you can't really like say anything real without sticking your neck out a little bit, without being vulnerable. And like, I think we forget that. I think that we think that we can say something that people need to hear without exposing ourselves a little bit, in all of our grit and messiness and like true imperfection, not the like curated imperfection that we're comfortable talking about on the internet,
Yeah.
Like many of us creators, we're comfortable admitting like we struggle with depression, for example, but then it's like, oh, let's talk about how you flew off the handle at your husband and you were like extra, angry, like let's these things that like these sides of ourselves we're not comfortable showing. Like we're comfortable talking about the times like our friends hurt our feelings, but not the time we were the person who like ghosted a friend. And like, I don't know. I feel very focused on that right now mentally. Like I feel like that's kind of the message that's on my heart right now. And like when you finish writing a book, there's sort of the like, well, what is my next message? And I feel like my next, I don't know, just big thing on my heart has something to do with like getting real and, breaking away. There's so much curated vulnerability right now. And I think it's counterintuitively making us feel more alone because we see these pictures that look like they very well could be a full picture of humanity. This person is talking about their depression. They're talking about some of their issues. And so we think that's like a full picture of them. That's almost more isolating than if they're just showing you like smiling photos. And it's way harder to tell that it's not real, but it's not fake, but it's not the whole truth. That's definitely the case with me. And it's not that I want to like start bearing all my secrets and my whole life on the internet. I don't want to do that. And, I have private people in my life, but I'm trying to just figure out what vulnerability means for me while maintaining the sacredness of like my privacy.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, how the curated vulnerability makes us more lonely and disconnected. It's almost like the difference between something clearly being face-tuned, like
Exactly.
a picture's edited to the point where
you look like a vampire. You're like so smooth.
And the metal like bars are all morphed, right? And then you're like, okay, like we're struggling with some insecurities. Right. It's edited versus just a little tap for that one little pimple.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a tough place to be. I love that episode on Soul Gum. Oh my God, I sound like I'm obsessed with you.
No, not at all. Like, and I'm obsessed with you too. Thank you for listening to Soul Gum. That makes me happy.
Yeah, when you talked about on that episode, you also mentioned that something about writing the book, and because it wasn't subject to a little box on the internet, it let you be like fully in your art, release your art, say something real, be vulnerable in the way that feels really aligned to you, and then also not get instant feedback on that.
Yes. I think art was not made to be shared and consumed the way we're sharing and consuming it right now. Like this like culture of immediacy where you create something right away, send it out into the world. And then there's very binary reactions almost, like with things like buttons, where it's like, I like it or I do not like it. And, comments are almost always, it's rare to get a comment that has true nuance where there's like positive and negative elements to the comment. It's almost always like someone loves it, they're commenting to tell you they love it, or they hate you and they wish you were dead. You know what I mean? Like, that's an exaggeration, but like we are interacting with art and media in this very binary way right now that I think is a little antithetical to the purpose of art. Like I think art is meant to like make us think, and you have a gut reaction and you don't know how you feel. And part of you is like, a little like clutching your pearls because it's a little scandalous, but it also has a deep core. Like art should be chewy. And I think we're trying to feed algorithms that have no patience for like a slow burn. And that's hurting artistic integrity. And we're also all trying to avoid controversy, and I think that hurts artistic integrity. Like we should be mindful of the other people and their feelings. And it's not like I have, secret like
also if you follow Victoria, she's like the sweetest, most conscientious,
I have
great,
a bunch of vicious opinions or anything, but I'm trying to stop filtering my brain through like what I think a comment section would say about it, because it's exhausting. And it's
well, and it's this curated filtration because to some extent, we are very controversial on the internet. There is more rage baiting than ever. There is more like all the studies show that it is the type of content creators create is divisive with that first 3-second hook. And it doesn't say anything real because like we talked about the anti versus pro, it's still on one side or the other without nailing anything about the human experience in the middle.
100%. We're all trying to have a hot take that everyone will agree with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some fiery take that everybody's going to agree with and nobody's going to be mad at.
Is that what my hot take was about reading fiction novels?
No, I don't think so. I think that was a good
Is that
take.
Considered a hot take?
I liked that. I'm also like there's a creator I follow on TikTok, Wildlin. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. I love him. But he made this video that I loved about like the word take. And I was like, we're even like putting our opinions in this binary of like good take, bad take, hot take. Do you know what I mean? Versus like,
tell me more about that. The word take, like when we say hot take.
Like that's a good take. That's a bad take. And the way it's like, we're kind of even parsing out little opinions as things to be consumed. Do you know what I mean?
Shit.
Do you get what I mean? Yeah.
No, that's what I was like, wait.
It's like we've reduced even thinking to short form, like take versus like I'm a multifaceted being. You know what I mean? Like with my thoughts on this
my jaws on the ground.
You know, like that really, I really heard that.
What keeps you hopeful? Whether it's in your own personal dark times or when you made the big shift with law. You very nonchalantly were making me a cup of tea and you're like, yeah, I kind of just like tore my whole life upside down and only practiced
your
law
Saturn
for
return
5
is
years.
coming.
Well,
Mary was
we
asking about what my Saturn return was like. And I was like, well, burned my whole career to the ground a little bit or just walked away from it, I guess. But
tell us more.
So what keeps me hopeful? I'll start there. I think that something I'm thinking about a lot lately is I think that when it comes to any feeling, whether it's like belief, like I have walked my way back to being a spiritual person after like this dark, nihilistic, atheistic phase. And that feels really good to me. Or hope is another example. Like I've stopped trying to make myself feel ways. I've stopped trying to make myself believe. Instead, I choose where to direct my attention. Like we cannot control our feelings, but we can control what we pay attention to. And so like Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets, you love Mary Oliver too.
That was the other thing I wrote down. You peeked at my notes.
No, but I also talk about Mary Oliver like I would have anyway, I promise. But Mary Oliver talks about like, do you know how Mary Oliver talks in Upstream about how like attention is the beginning of devotion? I think attention is the beginning of any feeling. So like if you want to feel hopeful, pay attention to like things that make you believe that there's goodness in the world. You know, if you want to welcome spirituality back into your life, if you want to believe in something, like it's not a matter of digging for what the truth is. It's a matter of like directing your attention towards things that suggest that there's great mystery in the universe, you know? And so when it comes to feeling any type of way, like
so casually drop the most profound thing in the world and then follows it up with,
that's my little verbal filler. I'm such a girl and a like girl. I feel like when I speak in my own content, I don't say like and because I'm stopping to think about what I'm going to say. But when I'm speaking to someone else, people compliment me on that a lot on the internet, that I don't use verbal fillers. And I'm like, I use them constantly. I've just planned out in my head exactly what I'm going to say.
I have no beef with verbal fillers because you're like a youthful, womanly version of like Plato meets Buddha.
Stop it.
And then she's like,
You're so sweet.
What is it? I need to like go back and listen to that. And I want you to repeat it again. What did you just say that blew my mind?
So I was talking about Mary Oliver, attention is the beginning of devotion, and how I think attention is the beginning of feeling any type of way. So if you want to feel hopeful, turn your attention towards things that make you think the world is good. Like there's so much bad in the world, and we should be focusing on that. But we also have to keep focusing on the beautiful parts too. We have to, or else we will think there's no hope, right? Or when it comes to spirituality, make-believe, the title of the book partially is a reference to the childhood game of playing make-believe, right? Because make-believe does include a lot of like nostalgic elements. And I think nostalgia is a really powerful tool for reclaiming joy and wonder. But I also mean by the title, make yourself believe. And it's suggesting that maybe we do have more power to make ourselves believe in goodness, in God, in hope, in all the good things in the world. Maybe we have more power than we think over how we see the world. I said again.
There's nothing I love more than a double entendre. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
The specific section on hope, and even the subtitle of Make Believe is Poems for Hoping Again. There are a couple of good ones on hope, but Can you read one more for us? One more
Of
poem for
course.
us?
Of course.
I think it would be so special. One of my favorites. Okay, wait, you choose between It's Not Too Late and Reasons to Stick Around for a While.
I'll do whichever one you prefer, but I'd say I prefer Reasons to Stick Around for a While.
Okay, good. We were aligned on that. That's
Okay.
what my gut said too. But It's Not Too Late is really, really good. So go get Victoria's book so you can read all the poems.
It was so embarrassing when I was recording the audiobook for Make Believe. I kept burping and my voice kept cracking. But the director was so nice about it. She was telling me that like celebrities like get nervous and their voice cracked. That was very encouraging to me. But I'm sure mine did crack more. She was just saying that to be nice. It's also so like embarrassing to have like people in the other side of the booth or whatever that can hear like your stomach and your like trapped gas and your like little burps that are just in your throat.
My biggest flex is that when I was recording my audiobook, I was in a pretty fancy studio, and afterward I made my producer play the Succession theme song.
I don't know it.
What? It's the one that's like dun, 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 dun. Oh my god, this is
I love
embarrassing.
that.
Okay, never mind.
No,
This
it's
is like
not
a
embarrassing.
movie reference. That
I'm
nobody
I'm
knows.
just like I'm media illiterate. I'm not good with this. Is coming back to me needing to consume more fiction things. Like I don't watch enough television. I need to get on that. But that sounds really cool. You should have like a walkout song when you do your
I should have used it at my wedding.
audiobook. I love that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Reasons to stick around for a while. If it's spring, stick around for summer. Soon the sun will burn off the clouds by 8 a.m. most days. You'll feel it on your shoulders during your morning walks. You'll sit on yoga mats in parks until the rubber burns your legs, laughing at stories you've heard 100 times. You'll run barefoot in wet grass. You'll lie on a towel in your driveway and eat watermelon slices. It will stay light outside until 9 p.m. You'll get a gas station slushie and it will taste exactly like it did when you were a kid. You'll go to the pool and see lots of bodies in bathing suits. You'll remember that bodies don't look how they look on the internet. You'll swim in the ocean and think about how people have brought their problems to it for millennia. You'll remember you are part of something infinite. If it's summer, stick around for fall. Soon there will be a chill in the air when you leave for work. You'll go thrift shopping for sweaters. You'll sit on bleachers in a sea of tipsy people and shout about what's happening on the field, even though you don't understand what's happening on the field. You'll glue rhinestones onto your Halloween costume all October. You'll drink chai lattes. You'll watch scary movies and look away during the scary parts and laugh at the jump scares. You'll go to a haunted house and scream until you're hoarse. The leaves will change colors and then fall to the ground. You'll remember change and loss are natural. You'll burn your casserole and everyone at Friendsgiving will eat it anyway. You'll remember that there are people who will take you whole, burnt parts and all. If it's fall, stick around for winter. Soon you'll be able to see your breath when you step outside. The city will put up the big tree downtown. You'll pull out your box of decorations and play music while you wrap lights around the banister. You'll scour thrift stores for the perfect gift. Then you'll wrap up the vintage tour t-shirt and Mariah Carey coffee cup in brown paper. You'll watch your friend's face light up when they unwrap it. You'll eat big meals with people who feel like home. The magnolia trees will hibernate, bloomless and fine with it. You'll remember nothing blooms all year long. Children at the mall will take pictures with Santa, full of nervous energy and hope. You'll remember what it feels like to believe in something. If it's winter, stick around for spring. Soon it will be warm enough to wear your favorite t-shirt without a jacket covering it up. You won't shiver when you walk the dog. You'll switch from hot coffee to iced. Peanut butter eggs will be back on the drugstore shelves and blueberries will be in season. Wildflowers will line the highway with color. The robins will sing love songs for each other and you'll get to bear witness. Tulips will fill flower beds in grocery store parking lots. The bears and the squirrels and the wood frogs and the groundhogs will come out of hibernation. You'll remember life always begins again. The perennial you thought died in January's ice storm will surprise you with a bloom. You'll remember how much can be survived.
Where and when were you when you wrote that?
I was here. I was home. And it must have been October, fall. It was fall. This poem makes me really emotional because I think it's such a scrappy place that once you've been there, you don't forget when you're just trying to look for any reason to like want to continue. And I think that when you're in that place, so much language, like so much of what people say about self-love feels so impossible. It feels so unattainable that like you just need to love yourself or you need to find your why. It's like, that's like, it just feels so impossible. So to me, reasons to stick around. And I've shared in that vein for a long time. I have, I'll share on the internet little things that are coming up, just like in media and culture, like movies that are coming out or astrological events that are happening, just imminent things in the future that might be exciting to somebody. Because I think that often when you're really struggling, trying to like cling to purpose or a deeper why is like utterly impossible. So you just need like whatever little reason will get you to the next day, whether it's like, I'm going to go to the gas station tomorrow morning and I'm going to get a cookies and cream bar, or I'm going to stop at Taco Bell on the way home, or I'm going to pull through this place and get breakfast, or, just like tiny things.
So much food to look forward to.
All of the examples being food. But yeah, but just like little tiny things. Yeah. Flowers blooming, the weather changing, whatever. Like sometimes that's all.
The one about your perennial surprising you with a bloom.
Yeah.
My hibiscus caught a cold. And like if a hibiscus catches a cold, they like shut down. They look dead.
That's amazing.
Out. And then out of nowhere, they're just like brand new again. It's wild.
Bro, we have so much to learn from plants. They're like so wise.
Like don't just throw them out. You think they're dead. Your orchid, it's not dead. It's going to bloom in a year. Just give it some time.
Right. This girl, this fiddle leaf fig, everyone's always concerned about her, but she's been alive for years. She is much stronger than she looks.
Accept her as she is. Yeah, it's such a to say that's a good one is an understatement, and reminds me of what you said a little bit earlier. I think it was related to spirituality and religion. You said something like, I don't know, I forgot how you worded it. The way I interpreted it was, it doesn't need to be true. You don't need to like prove your point. It could just be useful to you and helpful to you or fun for you. Right. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I am with like astrology and
yes.
I don't care if like being an Aquarius means I'm this way. This is the way I am and I want to be, and let me enjoy my thing.
100%. And there's a blurring of, if it's real to you and it affects the way you live your life, who's to tell you it's not real? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not concerned whether thinking about God, for example. First of all, what are we even talking about? Because like Deepak Chopra, for example, says like God is the unknown. And then there's like, Judeo-Christian God, like this like anthropomorphized, like Abrahamic, what are we even talking about? God could mean a million different things. And then wherever you land on what it means to you, it doesn't matter to me if it's true. If it makes you like, helps you live a life that's loving and connected and makes you feel in sync with humanity and guides you to live your life in a way that's led with love, it doesn't matter, I don't think, if it's true. And I spent so much time, I was raised Southern Baptist, evangelical Christian, and I always had a lot of doubt. I've always been a super spiritually focused person. Like I was raised religious, but more than that, I've always been like, it's always been on my brain. Like I was a little kid waking my parents up in the middle of the night, like asking questions about what happened when we died and like I've always been really, really like curious and focused on it. And I think in my 20s, I had quite a spiritual crisis because I just finally like could not could not deny my doubt anymore. And I dug so hard, like trying to figure out the truth of what I believed to be true.
Did you wear black eyeliner?
I did paint my nails black a lot.
That helps.
Yeah, that helps. You gotta, if you're gonna be in your like nihilist phase, it has to also be an aesthetic. It can't just be a crisis. It needs to also affect your clothing. That's an important part of things. But yeah, but that was like such a sad place to be, because at the end of the day, there's so many things in the universe that are unknowable. These are unanswerable questions. Like, you will not find the answer of like whether you have a purpose or whether astrology is real or whether God is real. Any of these things, like, unless you believe that there will always be things that are beyond our perception. So it's impossible to disprove the truth of anything, you know? I do think I believe at my core that there are mysterious forces that we can't understand, and that the stars mean something, and that we're doing something here, and that we're in a loving universe and we're connected to each other meaningfully. But if that's not true, I don't want to know, you know? I don't want to know. Like, I love being a Scorpio. I love being someone who is spiritual, who believes. So that's what I choose to. I look for things that confirm those beliefs.
What I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't matter if it's true, as long as it brings you joy, and of course, not hurting anybody. How do you tap into joy? There's an undercurrent of it in your poems, and then kind of toward the end, it really like unlocks in this, like you said, there's themes of nostalgia, this like inner child. Like, how does joy show up for you as of late?
It's so interesting because in my 30s, for the first time in my adult life, I feel like a little kid again. I really do. And I think that nostalgia is so interesting to me. And I've been thinking about it a ton, in the sense that I think nostalgia, girlhood, inner child work, these are things that are really popular right now. And they're very like surging in the culture, especially among women. And I think that often when that's the case, like nostalgia, for example, gets like thrown in this bucket of kind of just like vapid, girly ribbons, bows, like pumpkin spice latte, Ugg boots, basic, when really like nostalgia is such a powerful tool for joy.
And also like a little bit ugly.
Yeah, totally. Because like recalling is often like gritty and yes, 100% ugly. And it's a reminder of our nature, in the sense that when we engage with nostalgia and memory, we can see so much more clearly that we were not born hating our bodies. We weren't born at war with ourselves in all these ways that we learn to be, or disconnected from each other. You know, all of this is learned. So I think nostalgia is a big part of joy. If you feel like you don't know how to access joy, and I felt that way often, considering the question of kind of, what did I love when I was little? What way could I have played all day and like not be ready to go to bed and want 5 more minutes and 5 more minutes and 5 more minutes because I'm having so much fun? And it's different for different people. Like, some people love to play with others. Some people love to be outside in nature. Some people love to create things. But I think we don't change as much as we think we do. You know, our paths into joy stay the same to an extent. And like, I think about myself, and I was such a creative kid. And I was such an outgoing kid too. I was really, really like just loud, and I loved people. And in my 20s, like I was so just like buried under layers of insecurity and doubt and struggle that I had an entirely different personality. Like I would have told you, like I was an introvert. I was super socially uncomfortable. Not that there's anything wrong with being those things at all, or that I think that, you know, I don't think that everyone who's an introvert is like that way because of like insecurity. Not at all. But for me, that was a different personality. That wasn't actually who I am. And so chipping away a lot of that stuff and getting more in touch with who I actually am as a person has unlocked so much joy. And like, I've obviously had a dramatic way, like you don't have to like quit your job and, you know, do all the weird stuff that I've done. But I think just little ways of kind of reconnecting with what was I like before I learned all these different ways of how I'm supposed to be.
Personally, I was butt ass naked.
Period.
At all times.
As you should. As you should. And it's so nice, like before you've learned anything about your body as like a sexual object or like anything. So you're just like, you know, you remember like Donnie from the Wild Thornberrys? Did you ever watch that show? It's just like a little like boy who ran through the jungle. I don't really remember the plot, but
no plot. It's just a boy who runs through the jungle.
But like, yeah, where you're just kind of like a dog or something. You know what I mean? Like you're not at all thinking about your body in a critical way or a sexual way or anything. Like it just is what it is. It's your vehicle for like running around. And it's sad because so many people don't ever remember being in that position with their body. Like I was fortunate too to have like an upbringing where I remember when my body was just, you know, I'm at the pool, I'm wolfing down ice creams, I want to go down the slide, I'm skinning my knees. And my body was just a totally different thing to me, you know? Then you learn all the different things that a person, and especially a woman's body is. And it irrevocably changes, you know, we'll never fully get that innocence back, but it's nice to remember, and I do think it can help us find peace with our bodies now. Yeah.
Can you read us one more poem on joy if your publisher?
They'll be fine. I doubt they're listening.
Okay. There's one called Don't Save Joy for Last.
Yeah.
On page 116.
I'm curious about this story of fishermen.
Oh, you don't know what I'm referring to?
Oh, I think I do, actually, maybe. We'll see. We'll talk about it. Don't save joy for last. If I spent less time sitting in the sun and more time sitting at my desk, maybe I could really make something of myself. If I read fewer romance novels and more self-help books, maybe I could find the formula to unlock the life of my dreams. If I spent less money on lavender lattes and put more money in the bank, maybe someday I could afford a big house with a wraparound porch where I could sit in the sun, read a romance novel, have a lavender latte. While I was reading, I think I know the story of the fisherman. Embarrassingly, if it's the story that I know, I saw it at a Jimmy John's, on the wall at a Jimmy John's. It's like a story of like a fisherman who, and it inspired this poem. I talked with my editor about it. Like, it's like a fisherman who, there was like an American businessman that came and was like, you should like grow your operation so you could da-da-da. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly the story. I grew up on it. Well, by grew up on it, I mean, my mom is a Scorpio queen like yourself and was always very like spiritual with me in that way. And yeah, the story that she told me pretty often.
And I wanted to know who wrote it too. I took a picture of it and sent it to my editor. So I'm super curious.
I think, Jimmy John's came up right away when I Googled it. Yeah, so it's called The Story of a Mexican Fisherman. I'm sure it's been like modified over the years. But yeah, basically like an American comes to Mexico and he sees this fisherman and he says, an American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, only a little while. The American then asked, why didn't he stay out longer and then catch more fish? The Mexican said he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. The American then asked, but what do you do with the rest of your time? The Mexican fisherman said, I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take siestas with my wife, Maria, stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life. The American scoffed. I am a Harvard MBA and could help you. You should spend more time fishing and with the proceeds, buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you would have a fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you would sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. You would control the product processing, distribution. You would need to leave the small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, then LA, then New York, where you will run your expanding enterprise. The Mexican fisherman asked, but how long will all this take? 15 to 20 years. But what then? The American laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions." "Okay, then what?" Then the American said, "Well, you would retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play your guitar with your amigos."
I love that.
I love this so much. I literally grew up on my mom telling me this story.
Is it just like an old tale? It doesn't have a...
I think
it's just like an old tale. Yeah.
It is so true. And it just highlights how we're in just such a rush. And we don't realize that, like we were talking today, I was like, I'm building out my podcast studio. You're like, I want a podcast studio. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait for my podcast studio to be done, all this stuff. But like the reason why I'm here right now is because I don't have a podcast studio and I have flexibility and we're not bound by agents. And do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And we're not trying to like be cool for each other. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and it's also just like my friend Delara Gordjon, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She's a creator. She said something once that really has always stuck with me. She said, the only reason you ever want anything is because of how it will make you feel.
Yes.
And like you have access to that feeling right now.
That's the first thing you learn in like all the life coaching trainings that I've done.
So true.
Yeah, it's always about
like
the feeling.
We want to feel successful, or we want to feel happy, or we want to feel organized, or we want to feel so many of the things that I want right now. It's because I feel like they will like give me more control of my time. And it's like, no, but Victoria, you could take some of your time today.
Yeah.
Have access to that feeling right now. And instead we like run like little hamsters on a wheel towards like the possibility of feeling that in the future.
Mm-hmm. That's why the title of your book is so genius. Make believe. Like it's almost like decide.
Yes.
My yoga teacher and I are obsessed with you. I actually am like surprising her with this. Like this whole interview is just for her.
Oh my gosh. What's her name?
Her name's Shauna.
Hi, Shauna. Hi,
Shauna. She's amazing. I've been practicing with her for a few years and we just shared a mutual love for you. And she's going to literally shit her brains out when she sees this. Yeah.
That's so sweet. That makes me super happy.
Yeah. It's just, you're touching so many lives, I'm sure. And
right back at you. You know you are too. You know you are too. Sometimes it takes like seeing someone else to, you know what I mean? Like
everything's a mirror. Yeah. And I was like, when I was picking out pieces that I love about you, I was like, oh, we share a love for Mary Oliver. And like, we're both reading A Little Life. And like, obviously these are things like I adore about you. Oh, I wrote bisexual, like I know, married, hetero.
Okay, bisexual.
Yeah. Sorry, we didn't talk about it
no,
too in
okay.
depth. But still, I was like, oh, I love this. She's so cool, whatever. And then I was like, oh, but we like have it in common. So that was fun. Okay. What do you love about yourself?
Oh, what do I love about myself? I love my scrappiness. I think that a lot of where I've landed in my life and like things that I've been able to achieve, there's a lot of things going on there. There's privilege, there's lots, but like I am scrappy. Like I will ask or I will like squirm around and figure out a little way to make it happen for myself. If like, I think so many of the things that we want and we see other people get, we think that like those people just have like reached a level where that opportunity presents itself to them. But I think that maybe there are some people like that. That's not the case for me with anything that I have. Like I've like squirmed around trying to, even social media content's a good example. It's trying to figure out what little things I can do to get it working for me, or writing or wanting to write a book, or asking around, trying to like, I will go out and try to get things that I want. And I really like that about myself. I think it's a really good quality that has gotten me far, made me really happy, changed my life, like helps me be a better person and just more like live a more true life. Like if I like someone, I'll hit on them. If I'm not single anymore, but like, you know what I mean? Like that's a really good thing about me.
I love that about you too. This has been such a pleasure and joy and so soulful, as is everything that you do. I cannot wait for everybody to get Make Believe, your poetry book.
I'm so happy you're here. This was so much fun. It was so much fun to get to talk to you. You're just a delight. You're a delight. This was so much fun. Thank you for having me.